Picture this, it's 1975, and a song in both English and Spanish is blasting through radios across America. The artist, a Mexican-American performer who'd spent 3 years in one of the toughest prisons in Louisiana. Before the Next Teardrop Falls would make Freddy Fender the first Latin artist to top both country and pop charts simultaneously, but his path there was anything but smooth. From picking cotton in Texas fields to performing at the Grand Ole Opry, Freddy Fender's voice carried the weight of two cultures. He'd go from serving time in Angola Prison to winning multiple Grammy Awards. Yet despite his meteoric rise, something happened in the late 1970s that would change everything. The same man who once had 5 singles hitting the Billboard charts would soon find himself fighting not just for his career, but for his life. When Baldemar Garza Huerta was born in 1937 in San Benito, Texas, no one could have predicted that this son of migrant workers would revolutionize American music. His childhood was marked by endless days under the scorching Texas sun, picking cotton alongside his family for mere pennies a day. But in those fields, young Baldemar found his escape, singing corridos and traditional Mexican songs to ease the burden of hard labor. At night, he'd tune into the radio, absorbing an eclectic mix of country twang and Mexican folk music. His mother saved enough money to buy him his first guitar, a $10 instrument that would forever change his destiny. Young Baldemar didn't just play music, he lived it, teaching himself guitar by listening to both Bob Wills and Vicente Fernandez, creating a unique blend that would later define his sound. The name Freddy Fender came from his favorite guitar brand, but it represented something deeper, a bridge between his Mexican heritage and American dreams. By 16, he dropped out of school to pursue music full-time, playing small cantinas and dance halls across South Texas. His first recordings were Spanish versions of Elvis Presley songs, earning him the nickname El Bebop Kid among local fans. Military service interrupted his budding career, but even during his time in the Marine Corps, Fender never stopped performing. He'd entertain his fellow Marines with a mixture of rock and roll, country, and Mexican ballads. This period helped him perfect his signature style, a soulful voice that could seamlessly transition between languages and genres. After his discharge, Fender hit the road, playing any venue that would have him. From smoky bars in Louisiana to packed dance halls in Texas, his reputation grew steadily. His first real break came when local radio stations began playing his Spanish-language rock and roll covers. Songs like Rock, Baby Rock, and The Holy One started gaining traction beyond the Mexican-American community, catching the attention of regional record labels. By the early 1960s, Fender had developed a unique sound that blended the heartache of country music with the passion of Mexican ballads. He recorded dozens of singles for small labels, slowly building a following across the Southwest. His versions of traditional Mexican songs, sung with a rockabilly twist, earned him spots opening for established artists like Johnny Cash and Marty Robbins. Then came 1974, the year everything changed. Producer Huey P. Moe heard Fender performing in San Benito and recognized something special in his voice. Moe convinced Fender to record Before the Next Teardrop Falls, a country ballad that would include verses in both English and Spanish, a risky move at the time. The song was initially turned down by several major labels who couldn't imagine a bilingual country song succeeding on mainstream radio. But succeed it did. Before the Next Teardrop Falls shot to #1 on both the country and pop charts, making music history. The song's success wasn't just about its memorable melody, it was about Fender's ability to convey raw emotion in any language. His voice carried the weight of his struggles, the joy of his triumphs, and the richness of his cultural heritage. The floodgates opened. Wasted Days and Wasted Nights, a song Fender had written during his time in Angola Prison, became his second massive hit. The industry that had once dismissed him now couldn't get enough. He appeared on network television shows, performed at the Grand Ole Opry, and won the Country Music Association's Single of the Year award. For a brief, shining moment, Freddy Fender was everywhere. His success marked a significant shift in American music. Here was a Mexican-American artist topping the charts with bilingual songs, proving that music could transcend cultural and linguistic barriers. Between 1975 and 1977, Fender released a string of hits including Secret Love, You'll Lose a Good Thing, and Living It Down, each one showcasing his unique ability to blend musical traditions. The music industry had never seen anything quite like Freddy Fender. Record executives who once doubted the marketability of a Mexican-American country singer now scrambled to capitalize on his success. His concerts began selling out larger and larger venues, drawing diverse crowds that crossed all cultural boundaries. At the height of his popularity, Fender was performing up to 300 shows a year, often in venues that had never before featured a Hispanic headliner. His impact on the industry went beyond just record sales. Fender's success opened doors for other Latin American artists in country music, proving that authenticity and talent could overcome long-standing prejudices. Young Mexican-American musicians finally saw someone who looked like them, someone who hadn't compromised his identity to achieve success. The recording sessions during this golden period revealed Fender's exceptional musicianship. He could nail complex emotional performances in a single take, bringing studio musicians to tears with his interpretations. His producer, Huey P. Moe, often spoke about Fender's innate ability to find the heart of any song, whether it was a country ballad or a rock and roll standard. His versatility became legendary. In one session, he might record a pure country weeper, followed by a Spanish love song, then pivot to a rock and roll anthem. This musical dexterity earned him respect from fellow artists across genres. Willie Nelson would later say that Fender possessed one of the best voices in any genre of music. Television appearances on major networks brought Fender into American living rooms, where his charm and humor won over audiences who might never have given a Mexican-American artist a chance. He appeared on shows like Hee Haw and Austin City Limits, always proud to represent both his Texas roots and his Mexican heritage. The awards began piling up. Beyond his CMA recognition, he received multiple Grammy nominations and won the Academy of Country Music's Most Promising Male Vocalist Award. His albums were going gold, and his singles consistently charted in multiple categories: country, pop, and Latin. Perhaps most significantly, Fender's success challenged the Nashville establishment's narrow view of country music. His blend of cultures and languages proved that country music could evolve without losing its soul. He showed that the genuine emotions that drove country music, love, loss, longing, were universal, transcending any single culture or language. By 1977, Freddy Fender had achieved what seemed impossible just a few years earlier. He transformed from a regional act playing Texas dance halls to an international star, all while maintaining his authentic musical vision. His records were being distributed not just across America, but in Mexico, Latin America, and Europe. He was living proof that the American dream wasn't just a myth, but the height of success often comes with its own challenges. What should have been the pinnacle of Freddy Fender's career was about to collide with challenges that would shake the foundations of everything he'd built. The same industry that had embraced his unique sound would soon reveal its darker side. Living the dream came with a price. Behind the sparkle of rhinestone suits and the glare of spotlight lay darker realities that would soon catch up with Freddy Fender. His past experience with Angola State Prison hadn't just given him material for songs, it had left deep scars that alcohol increasingly helped him numb. Success had come fast, perhaps too fast. While audiences heard the polished performances on stage, backstage Fender battled demons that threatened to derail everything he'd built. The pressure of maintaining his crossover appeal while staying true to his roots began taking its toll. Concert promoters expected him to play up his Mexican heritage when it suited them, then tone it down when it didn't. The music industry of the 1970s wasn't kind to artists who didn't fit neatly into categories. Radio stations struggled with where to place his music. Was it country, pop, Latin? This identity crisis affected airplay, and gradually the hits became harder to come by. Record executives began pushing him toward more mainstream country sounds, trying to strip away the very elements that made his music unique. Alcoholism, a demon that had lurked in the shadows of his success, began taking center stage. Shows became unpredictable. Sometimes audiences would get the magnetic performer they'd come to see. Other times they'd witness a man struggling to remember his own lyrics. The same voice that had once brought listeners to tears now sometimes cracked with exhaustion and excess. The racism he encountered, though often subtle, was persistent. Despite his success, Fender found himself fighting harder than his white counterparts for prime performance slots and radio play. Some country music venues still viewed him as an outsider, booking him only when they needed to appeal to Hispanic audiences. One promoter even suggested he change his name again, this time to something that sounded more country. His record label's support began to waver as sales declined. The same industry that had celebrated his uniqueness now seemed eager to replace him with newer, more manageable acts. By the late 1970s, the chart-topping hits had dried up, and the massive venues gave way to smaller clubs and casinos. The pressure to maintain his crossover appeal while staying authentic to his roots created an impossible balancing act. Nashville wanted him to be Mexican enough to be exotic, but not so Mexican that it would alienate mainstream country audiences. This cultural tightrope walk took its toll on both his creative freedom and his mental health. Personal struggles amplified professional setbacks. His marriage strained under the pressure of constant touring and substance abuse. The money, which had once seemed endless, began to disappear into a haze of bad decisions and mismanagement. The IRS came calling, adding tax troubles to his growing list of problems. Throughout the early 1980s, Fender found himself caught in a cycle of brief recoveries in deeper falls. He'd pull himself together for a show or a short tour, only to succumb to his addictions again. The industry that had once championed him now treated him as a liability. Concert offers dwindled, and recording opportunities became scarce. Yet even in this dark period, Fender's talent never diminished. Those who saw him perform on his good nights still witnessed one of the most soulful voices in American music. Between the struggles, there were moments of brilliant clarity when he'd deliver performances that reminded everyone why he'd become a star in the first place. His fans remained loyal, particularly in the Mexican-American community, where he was still regarded as a pioneer who'd broken down barriers. But the mainstream music industry's attention had moved on to newer sounds and faces. The crossover appeal that had made him a sensation began to feel like a double-edged sword. Too country for Latin radio, too Latin for country radio. The toll of these struggles became increasingly visible. Photos from this period show a man aged beyond his years. The bright smile that had once charmed audiences, now strained and weary. Industry insiders began writing him off as another casualty of fame, just another talent burned too bright and faded too fast. The reality of being a Mexican-American star in the 1970s country music scene came with unique burdens. While other performers could focus solely on their music, Fender found himself unwittingly cast as a cultural ambassador. Every interview became a tightrope walk. He had to address discrimination without appearing bitter, celebrate his heritage without alienating mainstream audiences, and maintain his authenticity while meeting industry expectations. Radio programmers would sometimes refuse to play his Spanish-language verses during prime hours, claiming their audiences wouldn't understand them. Record stores often couldn't decide whether to stock his albums in the country section or the Latin section, leading to missed sales opportunities. The very bilingual appeal that had made him unique became a marketing challenge that frustrated record executives. His concert writers from this period tell their own story of decline. Venues that once catered to his every need now offered basic accommodations. The elaborate stage shows gave way to stripped-down performances. Even his backing band shrunk as financial pressures mounted. Yet somehow, the smaller settings occasionally worked in his favor, allowing his raw talent to shine through without the distractions of grand production. The toll of constant touring wore him down. Living out of suitcases, eating at truck stops, and sleeping on buses, the glamorous life of a country star revealed its grueling underbelly. Some nights he'd perform in 3 different venues, his voice growing hoarser with each show. The punishing schedule pushed him further towards substances that could keep him going, creating a vicious cycle of dependency. Legal troubles mounted alongside his personal struggles. Various managers and promoters had made promises they couldn't keep, leaving Fender to deal with the fallout. Contract disputes tied up potential earnings, and lawsuits drained what resources remained. The complex web of music industry agreements and obligations became a maze he couldn't navigate. By 1983, even his most loyal supporters began to worry. Shows were canceled with increasing frequency. Recording sessions were scheduled and then postponed indefinitely. The fire that had once made him one of the most dynamic performers in country music seemed to be flickering out. Industry magazines that had once featured him prominently now relegated him to their "Where Are They Now" columns. His relationship with his own music suffered during this period. Songs that had once brought him joy became painful reminders of what he'd lost. He struggled to connect with new material, and his songwriting, once so prolific, slowed to a trickle. The genuine emotion that had made hits like Before the Next Teardrop Falls so powerful was now overshadowed by personal pain. Those close to him watched with growing concern as his health began to deteriorate. Years of hard living had taken their toll, and warning signs of more serious problems began to emerge. Yet even as his body showed the strain, his voice retained that distinctive quality that had made him a star when he could summon it. But just when it seemed the music world had written the final chapter of Freddy Fender's story, fate had other plans. In a small Texas dive bar, where he was playing for a fraction of his former fee. Three musicians in the audience saw something others had missed. They recognized not just the legend he had been, but the artist he could still become. This chance encounter would spark one of the most remarkable reinventions in American music history. When Doug Sam walked into that Texas bar in 1989, he wasn't looking to form a supergroup. The Texas music legend had come to hear his old friend play, but what he witnessed sparked an idea. Despite the small crowd and stripped-down setting, Freddy Fender's voice still carried the same soul that had once topped the charts. Sam immediately called two other Texas music veterans, accordion virtuoso Flaco Jimenez and keyboardist Augie Myers. The Texas Tornadoes were born from that chance encounter, but nobody could have predicted their impact. This wasn't just another band, it was a cultural revolution wrapped in accordion riffs and country twang. The group took everything that had once been considered a liability in Fender's career, his bilingual vocals, his Tex-Mex style, his cultural duality, and turned them into strengths. Their first album exploded onto the scene with a sound unlike anything else in American music. Songs like Who Were You Thinking Of and Hey Baby Que Paso became instant classics, earning heavy rotation on both country and rock stations. The album won a Grammy, and suddenly Freddy Fender found himself back in the spotlight, but this time on his own terms. The Tornadoes toured relentlessly, playing everywhere from small Texas dance halls to major international festivals. Audiences who'd never heard of conjunto or Tejano music found themselves dancing to Spanish verses and accordion solos. The band's success proved what Fender had known all along. Good music transcends language and cultural barriers. For Fender, the Texas Tornadoes offered more than just a career revival. The camaraderie with his bandmates provided the support system he needed to regain his footing. Their shared background in Texas border music meant he no longer had to explain or justify his musical choices. He could simply be himself. The group's success led to renewed interest in Fender's solo work. Record labels began reissuing his classic albums, introducing his music to a new generation. Music critics who'd once dismissed him as a novelty act now praised his pioneering role in creating a truly American sound. Young Latino artists cited him as an inspiration, proving his influence extended far beyond his chart success. The Texas Tornadoes were just the beginning of Fender's renaissance. His 1991 solo album, Texas Sunset, showcased an artist who had rediscovered his voice. The raw emotion that had always been his trademark now carried the weight of experience. Songs like The Price You Have to Pay reflected the hard lessons of his journey while maintaining the hope that had sustained him. The honors began rolling in: induction into the Tejano Music Hall of Fame, a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame, Lifetime Achievement Awards from various music organizations. Each recognition seemed to heal old wounds, validating the artistic choices he'd made throughout his career. Just as Freddy Fender's career soared to new heights, his body began sending alarming signals that would force him to face his greatest challenge yet. The first warning signs appeared during a Texas Tornadoes tour in 2001. Freddy Fender, known for his energetic stage presence, found himself struggling to maintain his usual vigor. What doctors initially dismissed as tour fatigue turned out to be something far more serious. Hepatitis C had been silently attacking his liver for years. The diagnosis hit hard, but Fender faced it with characteristic resilience. He'd tell reporters, "I've beaten every other challenge life threw at me. This is just another song to sing." But this battle would prove different from any he'd faced before. The treatments drained his energy, yet he continued performing whenever his strength allowed. Then came the devastating news: his kidneys were failing. The years of medication and health struggles had taken their toll. Dialysis became a part of his weekly routine, scheduled around performances and recording sessions. Still, he refused to step away from music completely, saying the stage was where he felt most alive. In 2002, Fender's daughter Marla made an extraordinary offer. She would donate one of her kidneys to save her father's life. The successful transplant gave him a new lease on life, but fate wasn't finished testing his resilience. Just 2 years later, doctors discovered he needed a liver transplant as well. Through it all, Fender's spirit remained unbroken. He used his platform to raise awareness about organ donation, particularly within the Hispanic community. His openness about his health struggles helped break down cultural taboos around medical issues. Between treatments, he would still perform, his voice carrying even more emotional weight than before. The music industry rallied around him. Benefit concerts were organized, featuring artists from multiple genres who'd been influenced by his groundbreaking career. Young Latino performers spoke about how Fender had shown them it was possible to succeed without compromising their identity. His impact on American music was finally receiving the recognition it deserved. In 2006, doctors discovered lung cancer. This time, Fender knew the battle would be different. He faced this final challenge with the same grace and honesty that had characterized his music. In his last interviews, he spoke about his legacy not in terms of hit records or awards, but in terms of the barriers he'd helped break down. When Freddy Fender passed away on October 14, 2006, the music world lost more than just a talented performer. They lost a pioneer who had helped reshape the American musical landscape. His funeral in his hometown of San Benito drew thousands. Famous musicians alongside field workers, all touched by his music and his story. But while Freddy Fender's voice may have been silenced, the echoes of his influence would continue to shape music in ways he could never have imagined. The story of Freddy Fender extends far beyond his chart success or Grammy Awards. Today, when a Latin artist tops the country charts or performs at the Grand Ole Opry, they're walking through doors that Fender helped open. His courage to sing in both English and Spanish, decades before it became common practice, marked him as a true pioneer. Modern country music has finally begun embracing the cultural fusion that Fender championed throughout his career. Artists like the Mavericks and Los Lobos carry forward his legacy of blending genres and languages. In Texas, a new generation of musicians continues exploring the borderlands between country, rock, and Mexican folk music that Fender first mapped out. The issues he faced, cultural identity, industry prejudice, the struggle for authentic expression, remain relevant today. Yet Fender's story offers hope. He proved that artistry could transcend barriers, that music could bridge cultures, and that one voice could change the way people think about what American music means. In San Benito, Texas, where a young Baldemar Huerta once picked cotton and dreamed of something more, a museum now celebrates his achievements. His guitars, stage costumes, and gold records tell one story, but his real legacy lives in the sounds emanating from dance halls and recording studios across America, where artists continue blending cultures and genres just as he did. Perhaps Freddy Fender's greatest gift wasn't just his music, but the path he blazed for others to follow. In an era of increasing cultural divisions, his life reminds us that the most beautiful harmonies often come from blending different traditions. As his daughter Marla said at his memorial, he never saw himself as just a Mexican singer or just a country singer. He was a voice for anyone who ever felt caught between two worlds. The next time you hear a country song with Spanish verses or see a Latino artist accepting a country music award, remember Freddy Fender. Remember the voice that dared to be different, the artist who refused to be categorized, and the man who proved that music knows no borders.